citizens died, including Crispus Attucks, a former slave. Sam Adams demanded that the soldiers be tried for murder and that all British troops be removed from Boston. Governor Hutchinson, fearing rioting, ordered the troops removed from the city proper. Later in the year, the soldiers from the massacre were tried. They were defended by 3 men, including one of the finest lawyers in Boston, a patriot, Sam Adams' cousin, John Adams.
Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. John Adams at the massacre trials.
All but 2 of the soldiers were acquitted. Those 2 were court-martialed and then dismissed from the service. With his Boston Massacre hysteria diffused, Sam Adams would have to wait for over 3 years until December of 1773 to engineer a truly decisive protest over attacks on British monopolized tea. Colonists, dressed as Mohawk Indians, boarded tea-laden merchant ships, threw 23,000 pounds of tea into Boston Harbor, and then burned several of the vessels.
The tax on tea was 3 pence a pound, and that meant the average man would have to drink a gallon of tea a day to pay a $1 tax at the end of the year. So you really couldn't say that this was a cause for revolution. The sense that the British were slowly trying to take control of the American colonies, that is the essence of the perturbed state of the American mind in the 1770s.
After the Boston Tea Party, Britain struck back hard with a series of acts known in the colonies as the Intolerable Acts. The first of the acts closed Boston Harbor. The number of British troops there swelled to 3,000. The Patriot propagandists' ravings about repression and economic ruin had become reality. In Williamsburg, Virginia, at a 1765 session of the House of Burgesses, Radical Patrick Henry proclaimed in a fiery speech that taxation without representation is tyranny.
One of the few things we remember about the American Revolution is no taxation without representation. Benjamin Franklin, when he went to England to act as more or less the unofficial representative for several colonies, he wound up really speaking for all of them. He was told by the people he was representing, under no circumstances should he ever accept a deal for representation in the British Parliament. The last thing they wanted was to be represented in the British Parliament because they knew that they would be totally outvoted. No taxation without representation was strictly a slogan.
It was much more than simply taxation without representation. It was a war of ideas. The concept of independence was late in coming, but as the war opened and developed, the whole concept of personal and national liberty took control and was essentially the driving force.
The Revolutionary War was not only a war between Britain and her American colonies, it was a civil war.
Families were torn apart. There was a huge portion of the population that remained loyal to the king and to England throughout the war. Particularly in the American South, family against family and brother against brother, just as fierce in its reality as the American Civil War of later years.
One of the families the war would split apart was that of Benjamin Franklin, the self-taught genius who was one of the leading scientists, inventors, writers, and diplomats of his century. The relationship he would lose to the irresistible tide of war was that with his illegitimate son, William.
William was with his father when the kite experiment was performed. He was not the little boy that's generally depicted. He was in his early 20s, but he certainly was there, and he took a great interest in all of his father's experiments. A friend remarked that they were more like brothers than father and son. They were very, very close.
He has good principles and good dispositions, and I think is not deficient in good understanding. Ben Franklin on William, 1762.
Franklin spent nearly 15 years before the Revolution in England, serving as a lobbyist, first for Pennsylvania, then for Georgia and Massachusetts as well. It was there that his relationship with his son and with England began to deteriorate.
Going to England was always called going home in those days. He admired the king. He said good things about the king. So he had been very loyal, and the disappointment came bit by bit. It was started, I think, with the Stamp Act. Franklin thought that England was really suffocating the colonies, that the economic laws imposed by London were too stringent. Little by little, his disenchantment grew in the conviction that nothing short of a break would do. It was for him like the end of a love affair.
Every man in England seems to consider himself as a piece of a sovereign over America. Seems to jostle himself into the throne with the king, and talks of our subjects in the colonies. Benjamin Franklin, 1767.
At the same time, Ben Franklin began embracing the patriot position. His son William was hardening into a staunch loyalist. William had been made Royal Governor of New Jersey, a position many felt he received because of his father's influence.
The crown had given him respectability. You must always keep in mind that it was hard for him to be illegitimate.
I believe no governor was ever more affectionately received by all ranks of people. Even with those for whom I might have expected opposition, I am on very good terms. William Franklin.
Ben Franklin's irrevocable split with England came in 1774, when he was humiliated before Britain's Privy Council after leaking documents that supposedly revealed Massachusetts Governor Thomas Hutchinson as the instigator of Britain's tax policies in America.
I hope, my lords, you will mark and brand this man for the honor of this country, of Europe, and of mankind. He has forfeited all the respect of societies and of men. Alexander Wedderburn at the Privy Council.
From then on, his effectiveness in England was pretty much ended as a lobbyist. In fact, when Franklin left England on the eve of the Battle of Lexington, it was to avoid arrest. Had he stayed, he would have been arrested and thrown in jail.
Benjamin Franklin sailed home to join the 2 million Americans whose lives would be permanently changed by the coming war. By the war's end, he would be the most famous man in the world, but would also be forever alienated from his once beloved son.
I cannot but lament the impending calamities Britain and her colonies are about to suffer.